This is Brad Wiles, and I'm interviewing Ed Travis, myself, and Gail Germanson as part of the Bayview Historical Society's 40th Anniversary Oral History Project. It is currently about 10:30 a.m. on September 23rd, 2019, and we are conducting the interview at the Beulah Brinton House here in Bayview. Ed has agreed to participate and contribute today's recording to the Bayview Historical Society's archival collection, so that it may be preserved and available for future use as indicated on the deed of gift form and signed by Ed. Ed, please be assured that we understand that your participation is fully voluntary and that we can take a break, postpone, or terminate the interview at any time at your request. We do have a list of questions to help get the discussion started, but you're welcome to decline answering any of these that you don't want to answer and answer others as you see fit. We have some specific topics that we'll try to cover, but mostly we want to hear what you have to say about your experiences in Bayview. We've set aside 1 hour for this interview with the understanding that it may run slightly shorter or longer. We thank you for your time and your willingness to share your stories with us today. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So we'll just start off kind of generally. Can you please state your full name, where and when you were born, and where you currently live?
My full name is Edward Lewis Travis. I was born on June 13, 1952. I currently reside at 2732 South Logan Avenue, Milwaukee. But I resided before that for the first 40 years of my life at 2472 South Wentworth in Bayview.
Okay, good deal. So you were in Bayview for a long time. Did you go to school there?
Yes, I've been in Bayview all my life. Actually, I never left Bayview.
Yeah, sure.
And I attended the schools in Bayview. I attended Trowbridge Grade School, Fritchie Junior High School, and Bayview High School.
Okay. So can you talk about some other ties that you have to the neighborhood? You know, you've been here for your lifelong resident. And before this, we were kind of talking a little bit about your family history. Can you kind of go into that a little bit more? How your family ended up here?
My family, well, I can say this. My family is definitely from Bayview. Both my mother and father were born and raised in Bayview, actually 1 block apart. Mm-hmm. My father's family, the Travis family, resided at 2500 South Wentworth, which would be the corner of Wentworth Avenue and Russell. And that would be the building that's on the southeast corner. For years and years, it was a commercial building on the first floor, commercial space on the first floor, and then a living unit in the back and upstairs. When my father was growing up there, his father was Paul Travis, and he was considered the local barber. So he ran the barber shop there for several years. I would probably say a good 20 to 25, maybe 30 years.
What a time span would that have been? In the 50s?
They were there in, Paul probably picked the building up, in the late 19 teens, somewhere in there, and they resided there until the 50s. And so that building was theirs, and so on. Paul Travis, my grandfather, he originally came from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and he originally grew up in Philadelphia. His parents came from Sicily. He was Sicilian, and the original family name was Travia, Travia. What had happened is, at that time, there was a push, I understand, in this country to be Americanized when immigrants came here. And so what happened in the Travia family, some of the brothers decided to leave the city of Philadelphia to seek employment in other areas, and they thought it would be easier to gain employment if they simply had more of an American name. So 3 brothers changed their name from Travia to Travis. One went into the coal mining business. It was in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. Another one went out into, I believe, another city in Pennsylvania, I don't recall, and was a professional musician and got into the big band era. And then Paul came to Milwaukee seeking employment. When Paul arrived in Milwaukee, he originally lived on Water Street, north of downtown. And it was there, well, that was very close to the Third Ward, and he had attachments, obviously, to the Third Ward, being Italian and particularly Sicilian. So that is where he met my grandmother, my father's mother, whose name was Jenny. Her last name was Farina.
Did your family object to people changing their name? Was there any? No? They accepted that. The reason I ask is because I told you my dad, they thought he was Jewish and he couldn't find a job. And he was going to change his name. And his sisters in the family said they'd disown him if he did that.
Oh,
Yeah.
you know, no, there didn't seem to be any problem
Interesting.
with that. I think it went relatively smooth because they all kept the connections back to Philadelphia. Always went back to Philadelphia, and when you were in Philadelphia, you were a Trevia again. And the name, because there are names out there, other relatives. One of them is actually an undertaker, and always had her picture taken when we went there next to the building. It said Trevia Funeral Home, you know, and so on. So there was no objection. I think another reason why it blended in here is when they did come to this part of Little Italy, Bayview, Little Italy here, there were others that had Americanized names. We had close friends right on our block. They were the Danishes, but actually their name was Dentis, which was an Italian name, right? There was the Paradises on the corner, and so on. So there were other people that had that. So
Well, it's practical.
They felt at home.
Sure, it's a practical thing to do.
As with that. Okay, then like I said, going back to my father's family, Paul Travis and Jenny Farina married. And apparently my grandfather decided to, take up a little trade. So he became a barber. And I'm sure it was, the financial conditions or something. So they decided to come down to Bayview. And apparently they were able to afford to buy a building. And that building, again, located at 2500 South Wentworth Avenue, became Paul Travis's barbershop. And that's where they started the family on my father's side. My mother came from 2463 South Superior Street, which would be roughly half a block to the north of my father's homestead there. And their family is Italian, and they're from the central part of Italy. They're more from the central, a little bit northern part of Italy, and then on the Adriatic side. Their last name was Di Cesare, and so on. Grandpa Di Cesare, stories have him as several different jobs, but he did do some years at the mill and was a laborer at the Illinois Steel Company. My mother's family owned the property there, and they also decided to get into real estate a little bit for a little extra income. So they also owned 2 houses on Wentworth Street, 2 cottages. And I grew up in one of them, and that was the one at 2472 South Wentworth. And by all estimates, it was probably built in around 1900, and so on. Well, I guess you can say then over time, that's my mother and father were close together.
Yeah, sure.
So they obviously met somewhere along the line. Stories have it probably at Garibaldi Club for dances or so on. So is my history. So my father is John Travis, and my mother, well, her real name is Fermina, her maiden name DeCesare. She did not go by the name of Fermina because she just on my mother's side, the girls all had traditional Italian names that kind of didn't go too well with other kids, so they all kind of hanged on to nicknames. So my mother became Ginger. So if in all the accounts of
And what was it then?
Ginger,
But what was her original?
Fermina,
Fermina.
Fermina. And then her one sister is Fausta, Fausta, and then another sister is Delia, Delia, and that's Delia Molden. And you'll see her name. She was a charter member of the Bayview Historic Society.
I had an aunt, Apollonia, German, and she changed it to Leona.
And they did it. Well, there was another sister. Somehow she had a regular name, Elizabeth. And then they had two boys. They had Enzo, but he didn't care for Enzo, so he became Andy. And then they had Peppino, and he didn't care for Peppino, so he became Joseph.
I don't understand that.
So that would be my mother's family.
Did your father have? Well, obviously he had a couple brothers. Did he have any other siblings?
Yes. On my father's side, the oldest one was Anthony. Then my father John. Then brother Joseph. Sister Ethel. Louis. Edward. And then the youngest was Claudine. So boys, 2 girls, and 5 boys.
Wow.
And
Families on both sides.
and now the names I wouldn't know, but I'm sure this was pretty common in those days. But the story is, I believe they lost twin girls at a young, I don't know, I don't want to say stillborn or something, like they were a few days old or something, and they were twin girls and passed. But they're in their memories, but they never knew them. So it would be those. It would be the boys and then the 2 girls.
You bet.
As far as I know, all are deceased.
Okay.
Wow.
So let's talk a little bit about your immediate family then. You have other siblings besides yourself. What did your parents do? Did your mother work? What was your father's?
My family, my father, his main for most of his working life was a city of Milwaukee employee. He worked for the Department of City Development. He was in the Housing Authority. And he was a maintenance man with regard to the city housing projects.
Okay.
So he did that for quite a few years. He had somewhat of a career before that. He worked with the gas company in maintenance, and then he also worked a short period of time with the electric company, again in maintenance. I understand his first job was actually out of high school. You know, he graduated from Bayview High School.
Oh, yeah?
His first job, actually, he was considered a blacksmith, and he had a job at Greenbaum Tannery, which is a Bayview factory. It's on Greeley Street. It is now called the Hyde House.
Oh, my goodness.
That was originally Greenbaum Tannery,
Oh, yeah.
and that's where his first job was. I guess in high school he did some driving for one of the produce guys that came to Gruppy's. I believe it was Catalano. My mother she worked before married. I couldn't say for sure because she never worked when we were growing up. And I had one older sister. Okay, her name was Louise. And, well, she was 5 years older than me, so, and so on. She went Bayview High School, graduated from Bayview High School, and then married at a young age. It was like 20 or 21 or so on. And it just so happened she met a guy. Well, he was staying with relatives on the block, the Fodis. He was their cousin from Italy. He was from Genoa, Italy. So they met that way. Married and so on. They had one child. My sister is deceased. She passed of cancer.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I bet she went to school with either my husband. What year did she graduate from?
My sister,
Yeah.
so she was 5. I graduated in 70.
65,
So she
sure.
must have been right around 65.
She probably went to school with my sister-in-law or even one of my husbands.
And I graduated in 70. But the thing you have to remember a little bit, because it was kind of different there, you assume it's 4, but they kind of goof things up here, if I could say that, with the school system. You actually went to high school, Bayview, for 3 years.
Okay.
You went to junior high school for 3 years, and then they took the grade schools. Instead of 8, they dropped it to 6. 7, 8, and 9th was in junior high school at Fritchie. What'd that be? 10, 11, and 12
Yeah, sure.
were at Bayview, so 3 years. But and
Yeah,
so-
they recently tried something horrible like that at Bayview. I worked at Bayview for over 30 years as a para, and they tried that. They closed Fritchie, then they
Right.
moved it into Bayview. It was a total disaster.
And so again, to reiterate, me and my sister both went to Trowbridge. She was fortunate; she got to go there for 8 years. I wasn't. I was unfortunate. The 6 years and then going to Fritchie Junior High School.
Fritchie must have been brand new
It was
then.
almost brand new. It was a few years. It was a few years old.
Where is Fritchie?
On Howell
It's
Avenue,
Parkland now.
across from
Oh,
Humboldt Park.
Parkside?
That was
okay.
Fritchie.
My kids go there. Okay.
That's it.
That's it.
Right.
Yeah.
And Total Bayview Connection, because Fritchie, it was named for
Gustav
Fritchie,
Fritchie,
Gustav,
yes.
who was the longtime principal of Bayview High
Right,
School.
and my husband went to school with his son. Everybody in Bayview, honey, is so entangled you wouldn't believe it.
Oh, so
You're
that
finding
was,
that out, aren't you?
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
that was a connection.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, maybe it's because of the times today, or this. Why did they change the name?
It's a long, horrible
Okay,
story.
well, yeah, but some other.
Fritchie was supposed to be, when they made the choice schools, school choice, Fritchie was supposed to be the feeder school for Bayview, which was going to be School of the Arts. Because Bayview, of course, was quite famous for their
For
plays and their
musicals.
musicals. And then for some political reason, I don't know what, but it kind of fell through. And I was at Fritchie at that time in the art department. And we had federal money flowing in. You could not spend it fast enough for integration process.
Right.
And then that, for some reason, I'm not quite sure why it didn't work out, some political reason. And then Bayview was not School of the Arts. And then Fritchie kind of faded then.
I see. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So you've been in Bayview your
Entire
whole
life.
What did you do for a living? Talk a little bit about that. After you went to Bayview High School, what was your trajectory after that?
Okay, well, again, I went to Trowbridge Street, for grade school. I went to Fritchie Junior High School, and I went to Bayview. After Bayview, I went to UWM for 4 years, and I graduated with a degree from economics, with an economics degree. I was interested in things like maybe, urban type things, and so on. And a lot of my studies were for like urban economics. So I was kind of looking to be maybe like a planner, a city planner, things like that. I also, was developing an interest in like history, architecture, and so on. So I even thought maybe keep on going to school more for architecture. But what had happened is for a couple of summers, I was fortunate enough to get a seasonal job with the city. So I did have this seasonal job, okay? And so after graduation, I thought, this isn't bad. Maybe I'll just, stay with this seasonal job and we'll see if there's openings in my field down the road. So I became a full-time city employee. I worked for 2 seasons in forestry, and then I worked for 2 seasons in street maintenance. And then through kind of like a training program at the time, and I thought it was a little bit more into my interest. They were looking for what was called property appraiser aides, and that was in the assessor's office. So I applied for that, and I got it. I was accepted, and I stood in there for about 6 weeks under training, and then they offered me a full-time position. So my career has been basically, I was in the City of Milwaukee Assessor's Office for approximately 15 years. And then I decided to maybe change things up a little bit. And so I was already like certified in real estate appraisal and so on. So I became a private appraiser with a company for approximately about another 12 to 13 years.
Okay,
So on.
is it true when the assessor told me that if you could see Lake Michigan from your window, that added $1,000 to you?
Well, it's true. It adds value. You can put the dollar value on. I've heard it up to $1 million if you want it that
Because
way.
if I
$1 million
if I
view.
stand on my tippy toes
Right.
look through my front window, I can actually see the lake.
And yes, that's true. And I've always told people, they say, well, look at when I did, because I was fortunate. I still living here in Wentworth, and I was able to get the Bayview district.
Oh,
So it was great.
I was gonna say that's like the ideal job.
It was
for
the
someone
ideal.
that's-
It was the ideal job because not only did I, know of people in houses there, but now I could expand. I could expand out. Now I could actually say, I'm going to go to a place down on South Shore Drive, and so on. And I could tell you a side story, if I may. It was in the 70s. It was my district, and we have building permits that come out, and the assessors get all the building permits because you go out to the property and you see what value was added, and so on. So I did have a permit for 2590 South Superior Street, and the name on the permit was the Quincy's. So I'm thinking, oh wow, I heard this was the Beulah Britton house. Now this is before I was even a member or even knew about this, I knew it was a Beulah Britton house. So sure enough, I was the guy that did the Quincy kitchen remodeling when they put the cabinets in. And then I came back in 1983 when they put the garage up.
Did you see the new kitchen?
Yes. So that's my kind of what goes around comes around,
sure.
and so on. So Nancy Tawney. Okay, I work with her. I do the open house tours here.
Oh, okay.
So I work with Nancy Tawney. It's one Saturday a month. It's the third Saturday a month in the afternoon. And when I started here, I told her about that. So I always said, I remember the Quincy cabinets. So I dubbed them the Quincy cabinets because it was, she kept the house very nice. She was very sharp, very nice. She knew what she had. The thing is, those were the 70-ish, style cabinets. And I've told Nancy the little story about how she was accepting me, but she was a little leery, like a lot of people, and they get intimidated. So I told her I was going to measure the cabinets. So I took out my rule, and I was going to measure them. And I seen she was a little, kind of, oh, well, how much is this going to cost? And my taxes. I said, I'll tell you what. So I just took my hand real quick and I ran my hand across the counter, and then, and so on. I figured, oh, that's okay. I said, I already got it. I don't have to measure. She said, oh, I appreciate that.
Did you see?
But I got it roughly
Yeah,
anyway
sure.
because it's 6 inches of my hand.
Did you see the kitchen before they renovated it?
No.
Oh, darn it!
No.
So we're always wondering
But
what it was like.
I often wondered that too. What it was like. So that was that's my story. And like I said, I stood with private appraisal, off and on. It was a 2-man company.
Okay.
And a very good friend of mine that I met in the assessor's office. He went private eventually after several years of municipal, and he always said, if I go private, I'll give you a call. And I said, give me a call, and so on. So it worked out
Sure.
real good for me.
Well, it's such interesting because at the time that you're doing this, I guess, you have, because Bayview, you walk around, it's just such a mishmash of styles, and which is what makes it really unique. You know what I mean? You just
Right.
don't find that in a lot of places. And most everything is very well kept. But doing what you're doing, I mean, you have this view, I think, that a lot of people don't have in terms of the economic value of these houses and, how the styles are changing and kind of what. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like how has the landscape of the neighborhood changed? Like how did it change while you were there? What things did you
Like
notice?
Zelensky's house, for example.
That one, oh my God. Okay, let me say this, and from my observation, extremely fortunate about Bayview because structurally Bayview basically really didn't change. Very, very few structures have actually been taken down.
Sure.
So it maintains. What has changed dramatically would be the values, and so on. When I was doing them, I can tell you a certain house and a person over here. I told him there would be a time you'll see $100,000 values. He said, "You're dreaming." I won't say exactly what he told me, but and so on. Believe it or not, you have I've seen there was $1 million sale on social media. And all of these are $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. So again, structurally, very few have changed. A good example, my old block, like I said, the next block north of here, not a single one has been removed. Okay, I'm sure they've changed, on the inside and so on.
No,
but
absolutely.
But none of them. There's very few that have actually been taken down,
Yeah.
and new ones put up. And I think there was a combination of things. One is the people that lived there. The maintenance and the appreciation of owning a home was good. The other thing too, they were built. I mean, even the lower end ones, like say that that I lived in. I mean, I didn't live in a house like like this, but I mean, they were built.
Yeah.
They were built. Oh yeah, you can find some pretty bad ones, structurally and real short on the materials and so on. But this area here, and the other thing too, if you notice, it's only really up here in like Little Italy, and so on, where the majority of the like factory homes were.
Okay, yeah.
The farther south you start going here, you see the quality of the buildings, increase. And then you still on the other side of the tracks, like you go around Humboldt Park, there's extremely good quality over there, and so on. But I really haven't seen, again, structurally, I haven't seen hardly any change.
Well, our house is an anomaly. We live on Superior in Bennett, and it's the most modern house in that area. It's that long brown house that looks like Noah's Ark. It's right in the corner.
Oh, yeah.
And all
Yes,
around me are these
right.
really old. The house next door is an old farmhouse, and ours was considered quite modern. Now it's well, 60 years old, so it's not so
I
modern
think-
anymore. But at the time, it really stuck out.
I think the other thing too is at that time period, because you even look, well, Beulah's here, Victorian and nicely built. But like I point out on the people that come here on the tour, just take a look at the houses across the street, particularly on the west side of the street over there. They're duplexes now, but those were built as the rooming houses and boarding houses for workers, for the guys that worked at the mill. Just look at the quality that was put into it at that time. And I'm thinking, geez, if I was building a rooming house, I'm going to get many guys in there as quick as I can and charge, and get the money. Apparently, didn't look at it that way. They looked at, building a nice place, and so on. And they're still they're still remaining today, and so on. But, no, like I said, obviously the values have changed, and obviously the age of the people that are buying the homes and, coming into the neighborhood, has changed. And I think because Bayview is somewhat unique, I think, they sense that there's, you have pride. There's, you maintain. I know maybe all these millennials, I know they rent a lot and so on, but there's plenty of rentals going up in Bayview, trust me, and so on. And I think the ones that are buying, they still have that. Okay, or maybe they came from a family that instilled that, home ownership and pride and take care. I think you can parallel it to KK Avenue. Look at it from, say, Russell all the way to the end. All those buildings are 9 out of 10 are original. Very few have come down. The only thing that's changed is what's going on the inside.
Don't you hate it when they slap on some modern facade? It's Victorian on top, and on the bottom they've got.
That bothers me, and so on. A lot of them, though, the people that came in, particularly the early rehabbers around here, they had a sense. They had a sense of what this could be, and they kept it. They didn't throw up all of that stuff and and cover everything up. And we were fortunate in the area here. You had two very good, call them companies or men or so on. The first ones were doing commercials, and that one was Hershey and Buckholz.
Hershey, yes.
Right. They were
My husband did work for him.
Okay. And then later, a lot of the rentals and more of the commercial, and some commercials were
And the
done by
Doyles?
Bill Doyle did them. And he had a sense of good, So those two guys I always credit, for keeping it. Because they could have bought these places, knocked them down there, or just tear them apart and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of discussed a little bit some information about the Travis Post with and it was the American Veterans, the AMVETS?
AMVETS,
Okay,
American
can you
Veterans.
talk a little bit about that?
Okay,
it
well,
was your uncle, correct?
it was my uncle. So obviously I grew up, knowing the history of the AMVETS Post, the Travis AMVETS Post, and so on. And I do know that it's been fairly well documented, and it's certainly part of the Bayview history, and so on. Louis Travis was my dad's brother, and so he would be my uncle, and he was in the Navy, World War II, and he was on a light cruiser in the Pacific, and he engaged in sea battles. And all accounts that I remember, and there are some different accounts written, but through the family, it was the Battle of Midway.
Okay.
That he was engaged in, and that's where his ship got, attacked and so on. We do have an account well, I'll say this, you might have to edit this, but
Yeah.
we do have an account, but I can't find it right now.
Sure.
I'm gonna try to look for it in my stuff, where his story on the ship was actually accounted. He was a gunner, and there is an account of how he held out and so on. He did receive some medals posthumously. He never came back. He died at sea.
How old was he? About young, no?
20-ish,
Yeah.
in the 20s.
Oh, wow.
At the same time, the Travis family had two other sons in the war, and both of them were in the Pacific also. My father, John, was in the Army, and his brother, Joseph, was in the Army, and they were all in the Pacific at the same time. My father, John, and his brother are roughly about, they say 9 months, but make it a little more somewhere in there. I don't think it's exactly 9 months, but let's say a year or so apart. So they were very close in age. So when they got drafted at the same time. Louis then would have been a few years younger, and so on. I couldn't say how he got into the Navy. I don't know if they drafted in the Navy, but I know they were drafted in the Army. But I did not recall if he enlisted. He
Sure.
drafted and wound up in the Navy, and so on. So he was buried at sea.
Okay.
So the family history is definitely there, and again, it's pretty much accounted for, over time here, and so on. So they did decide to, develop a veterans organization, and they decided to go with the American Veterans and became the AMVETS, and then decided to build a post in Bayview because so many of the guys that came back were from Bayview. The other thing too is a lot of them were all buddies. You're all friends. You all grew up around here. You all went to school here and so on, as you've seen the names there, and so on.
Recognize a lot of those names.
So they decided to, on a location, and it just so happened on Conway, there was land up there, and it would have been city land that was, I believe, set aside for Harbor Commission land, and so on. Now you have to remember, this way before what you see up there now. No bridge or anything like that. It was just the land.
Old Smoky.
Old Smoky was across the street, correct. And then it was all like a big field, and then went into Jones Island, and so.
Is that the mill?
Old Smoky
Old
is
Smoky was a big engine.
It's a steam engine.
Steam
Oh,
engine.
okay.
right. With a
Train,
a
steam
train,
engine,
steam engine. I'm sure it was working at one time in its life.
Big engine.
Big. It's the old smokes with the big
Yeah.
wheels and the steam engine and so on. So yeah, Old Smoky was directly across the street.
They moved it to someplace in Illinois,
It's
right?
like in a railroad museum down in Illinois someplace.
We used to play on it when we
Oh
were kids.
yes, it was. It was neat to play on. They had a dummy in there, the engineer, right, and so on. So we used to play, and then there was a steep hill there. We used to sled down that hill and so on.
And the bridge was not there.
Oh,
the
no,
one
the
bridge.
bridge wasn't
It was
there.
just all
Yeah, it was
open.
just a big open field, and so on. I played in that field also, and then you were close to the tracks, so you kind of played along the tracks there, and so on.
And Potter was open.
Right.
Now it's closed, but you used to be able to
Okay.
walk right down Potter.
Right, Potter was open, you can just walk right across, because all that was no parkway, no highway. It was
Right.
just the railroad tracks, right?
So the post was a physical location then down there. Was it an actual building or was it like a memorial or what?
First, they purchased the land
Okay.
because they were able to get it cheap. I believe, and it's in here, they paid $1 for it or something. Because it was
cheap.
because it was like sitting there. It was city owned, but the Harbor Commission, because whatever plans they might have had, I don't know, but it was the Harbor Commission because it was right at the end of Jones Island, so it was Harbor Commission land, so they got that. Now, what happened is this, through the guys that were going to, form it and so on. And through the county supervisor, his name is in here, is Blackwood. His last name was
Blackwood. It says Blackwood. So
Right. They found out that at Mitchell Field, there were barracks. And those barracks were used in World War II to house POWs. Now, how many were there, that I don't know, and I don't recall where they came from. I don't know if they were Japanese.
I think they were German.
Or German. I would assume more German.
They were German.
Mitchell Field, is that by
The airport.
The airport.
the airport? Okay.
Right. So they had the barracks down there. And the barracks are long wooden structures, one story, and so on. What they decided to do, because they got the land cheap, they could get a barrack cheap. I don't recall what that cost. The idea was this: if they can move it, they'll take it, because then all they had to do was put the basement in,
Put a
foundation in, and then move the barrack on top.
So that building was once housing POWs.
Yes.
That is incredible. I didn't know that.
So what you see is actually an old POW, a barrack.
Wow.
And that came from, like I say, they were down by the airport. And again, I would assume they would have been the German.
They were German. I know somebody who
okay.
remembers that used to ride the bus into the city and hang out at the bars sometime because they had like a work release for these prisoners, and they'd come right into the city and people accepted them because it's a
Right.
pretty German community.
Right. And so on. And I think they were looked at, and I've read other accounts too. Germans were looked at a little bit better, more than the Japanese.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so on. As a matter of fact, I know I think I read an account, if it was from here or there were some in Madison too. I think
so too.
That they actually liked it so much they decided to
stay.
stay.
My grandma grew up on a farm the same way that in Nebraska, near a big military ammo dump, and they had a bunch of, and none of them wanted to go back when they.
No,
the war was
it's
over.
interesting, So they got the barrack. So the labor was all either donated professionally or all amongst the men themselves. So they dug the hole, put the foundation in, put the basement in. They did the work. The barrack was moved, put on the foundation, and that became
When was that? 50s?
46.
46.
I believe it would be 46 or 47. They
Wow.
organized in 46. So it's
49? The AMVETs built the posts themselves after organizing in 1949?
Oh, 49.
Does that make sense?
okay. This one, it would be a few years after, right? Okay, because I'm sure it took time. And so they organized in 46. There was 14 men, and so on. And then this gives the account of, through the assistance of, like I said, the county supervisor, Robert Blackwood, an old prisoner of war barracks at Mitchell Field, was acquired and moved to Conway Street. It remained that way for a short period of time, and then they decided to put an addition on it. And then, because of the nature of the organization, obviously it was going to be for income, a hall rental and so on. So then I know they put a kitchen in and so on. So it was remodeled over time, and it stood that way, well, almost to what it is today. Okay. What happened to the AMVETS organization is technically the Lewis Travis AMVETS Post is still there by name, but it doesn't really exist. I mean, there's a few people, there's a contact that you could call.
So the structure is.
Oh, definitely. what happened to the AMVITS organization is very typical of what happened to some of the other organizations. The men die, they pass on, they're old, health problems. They don't have the people behind them to keep it going, and so on. But the AMVITS here, they did extremely well, in my opinion. I mean, it's being a little bit biased, but the AMVITS Post became kind of a center in Bayview for weddings, parties, lots and lots of weddings were held there, and so on. It was probably the largest available, like, hall for rent, you know, at that time, and so on. So they kept it going for a long period of time. And then, again, membership decreases. There's nobody really behind them. I do know that they were trying to get Vietnam veterans to come in, but I think some of them had other organizations that, you know, they were going to, or maybe connections.
Was there any conflict between them and the Post, the Washington Post?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
I don't mean conflict, but any sort of...
No, not that I'm aware of. The other thing too is they were all connected under the so-called, do you remember the Inter-Council Organization of Bayview?
Vaguely.
Yeah, it is a group, it's all the businesses, organizations and so on. It's like the Inter-Council is like the overall, like see everything, and then you had it, the veterans organizations and businessmen and so on. As far as I know, no conflict at all, because what they did is they basically all worked together at the Water Frolics.
With the Lions Club?
Oh, and way before the Lions Club, when it was, the Water Frolics was put on by the Inter-Council of Bayview, and the beer tent every year was given to one of the organizations. So they alternated, so that's why everybody, you know, it worked out well.
No, I was thinking in terms of getting members.
Oh, not that I'm aware of. I think I know some. They're more loyal to what they were in, you know. I mean, we got them in our own family. The other ones, they're his brother-in-laws or whatever. They were American Legion or VFW. This one, I think, had more of an attraction of a neighborhood, because if you look at the membership, most of them were from here, and so on. My memories of the Post are my memories of the Post are good, because it was all fun for me. My dad, John, he bartended a lot, so I got to go up there with him while he was setting up for the weddings and so on, and I could run around in the hall, which was a very, very big hall, and so on, and I always remember that.
You'd sneak some soda.
Yes, soda. And then I also remember getting the sugar cubes from behind the bar, and things like
maraschino
the
cherries.
I was just going to say the maraschino cherries and so on.
Well, I lived above a bar. So I had to do it.
Sneaking those, or he'd give me and say, "Okay, get out of here now.
Sugar
Get out of here
cubes.
now."
Oh,
Sugar,
cubes,
the
I
little,
remember that.
little sugar cubes, soda.
Yeah.
I would play in the sink with the brushes, where you wash the glasses in. That was a lot of fun. And then when he did kind of say, "Get out of here," go outside, because it was on a hill. Okay, and if you know where it is, you'll see the hill. There's a hill there. Okay. And I just loved that hill, because I used to roll up and roll down the hill and so on.
Yeah.
And then if I was real good, he'd say, "You can go across the street by Old Smoky and play around there for a while." And then when the weddings or the things started going, when he started bartending, then he'd come outside and say, "Go home now." So then I just walk down Wentworth and I'd go home. So those are my memories, my memories of the Post. After it did sell and became DeMarini's, it was Phil and Dom's DeMarini's, I continued to go there. And I would run across both of them every now and then. We knew of each other, and so on. So we would always talk a little bit.
They're a
and
little
so on.
older than you, because
Right, they're-
my late
right.
husband was buddies with them at Bayview.
A little
so-
older, but we're
Yeah.
familiar with each other.
Sure.
Oh, you're from? I remember you. Yeah, we talk a little bit, and so on. I still go there maybe occasionally about once a year now, and so on. And for a few years, it just so happened to turn out that a neighbor of mine on Wentworth, she was waitressing up there. So I'd go and, go and see her and so on. Always had good memories. It didn't really change all that much. The decor changed a little bit, and so. But the bar that you see is fully
That's
intact.
Yeah, that's
Fully
awesome.
intact.
You know the irony, the Washington Post on KK that is no longer with us, but that restaurant was owned by DeMarini's
The
niece.
girls.
Yes.
Yes. I was there too.
Yeah,
In fact, I was getting to really like that place.
They did a lovely
Job
job
on-
remodeling,
yes.
but those are Phil and Donna's nieces.
Yes.
And it's kind of interesting how they both ended up in veterans.
And then they have their history, so you have to
Yeah,
be
well, we know.
a little careful. I mean,
Right.
because I still know people that, they, oh no, they're extremely loyal. It's either the boys or the girls. Right.
It was a
And
real nasty scandal.
It's a-
Yeah.
It's a
the pizza
local
wars.
scandal. Local nastiness.
and so on. So that's my, my recollection of the Ambits Post with regard to the family. I can say this: I never met my uncle Louis, and I never met my uncle Edward, and the one that died in the Korean War. But I do say this: they must have had an impact, because
Sure.
so many people have come up to me over time and they say, "Oh, your last name Travis? Are you with the Ambits Post?" And so on. It's a young. Oh, I remember. I remember going there. And then some of them even said, "I remember, your family, and so on."
Is there a memorial with his name on anywhere, like Humboldt Park, or no? Because they, the
Right.
names of all the veterans.
I was telling him, Louis never came back, so he's buried
Right.
at sea. But the family did put a stone in the cemetery, at Holy Cross Cemetery, a memorial type stone. Louis is on one side, and Eddie's, who did come back, is on the other side. With regard to anything around here, no, not that I'm aware of. The ICC, which is the Italian Community Center, they included him in their list of Italian Americans,
yeah.
Italian Americans that were killed during World War II. And the other memorial is this, and I don't know how it came about, if it was through either the Army or what have you. If you go to the War Memorial Center downtown, which is the art
Yeah,
the
that's
art
Veterans Park.
center, the actual War Memorial is it's a pool, a fountain and a pool, and then there's granite squares. You will see Louis and Edward's name are in there too. So I think that would be their memorial, their memorializing, and so on. But anything around here, no. I think that's why they chose the name, for that.
Oh, sure.
The little triangle across the street from
That's-
Puddlers, I understand those are Bayview people, World War I.
World War One. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, because it was a memorial to the Italian.
Right. And that's in their
soldiers.
little triangle, there's a
Yeah.
flagpole and a little triangle across from Puddlers Hall up there. So, I guess that would be my history. If you have any questions.
Well, I guess, yeah, just, we're coming up on about an hour here, so we'll kind of wrap things up. I guess, you being here so long, you talked, about your career here and some of your interests and some other things. Can you talk, do you have anything else to tell us about the way that, sort of the changes that you've observed with Bayview? Why have you stayed here so long? That's one of the things that kind of comes up, and, I think for people who live here, I think it's pretty apparent, but, you've been here for a long time. What are some changes? What's the appeal?
Well, the reason I'm here, I think it's twofold. One, I love it. I love Bayview, and if I wasn't in the situation that I'm in, I think I would still be here. I'm still here because I am now living in a house that I'm the third generation. And it was Grandpa Travis's house. He also got into real estate kind of a little bit later in his life there. So he bought a house on Logan Avenue, a duplex. He bought a house on Layton Boulevard, a duplex. Okay. And he was using those for rental. Okay. When the mother died first, Grandma Travis died first. Okay. And there's always been a story about her, and I know I've had local people, even my aunt, my mother's sister, always remembers her. And she was known as the Lady in Black. And the reason was because she was always in mourning. After Louis got it, she always wore black. Then Eddie gets killed in Korea, so she was always in black. They say she died of a broken heart. Okay, they say she died of a broken heart. Two sons lost, and so on. So she passed on first, and then Grandpa Travis, he was starting to have health problems. So what he decided to do was this: he decided to settle up his estate. Before he went this way, it was all taken care of. The barber shop he left to the oldest son, Anthony. The duplex on Logan, he left to my father, John. The duplex on Layton Boulevard, he left to the next one, Joseph. The two girls in the family, they received all the personal things like the jewelry and so on. So basically, it was in the family. So when I was growing up on Wentworth, my father had it for a rental. Okay. My father passed away young. He passed away at 66. Okay. Heart and stroke issues. So then the house went to my mother. Then my mother started having some health issues, so she decided to settle up on her affairs. So she wanted me to have the house.
What's the address?
My house?
On Logan?
2732 South
Okay,
Logan.
because mine was 2599, so you are,
Right, I'll tell you exactly where I'm at, because you can't miss it. You know where the bank is?
yeah,
I'm the first guy next door.
to the
to
bank on Logan.
on Logan Avenue. Well, people say, why do you live there? I say, I'm close to the
Next to-
money.
Yeah.
I am 2 feet 4 inches from
Used to be
there.
the old
It
A&P.
used to be A&P grocery store, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's why, and so on. And it's a very nice place. It was built in 1912, extremely well built, and I'm appreciative of that building. It's 2-story brick, stucco bays, full buffets in the dining room, leaded glass, stained glass windows, and so on. So
I probably sold Girl Scout cookies to
They
your mother
could be.
because that was my route.
So that's why, and if I didn't have the property, I don't think I would have left. I'm been perfectly happy here. I'm extremely fortunate that I've kept contacts all the way back to grade school. As a matter of fact, I have a tenant. His name is Tom Summer. We've been buddies since either 3rd or 4th grade at Trowbridge.
Wow, cool.
And he never left the neighborhood. He grew up on Superior Street. And when he was looking for a place to stay, I got a place, because mine was empty at the time. and he's been my tenant since. So we have two buddies from grade school living together in the same home, and I'll be honest, to this day, I still keep connections from high school. Some of my best friends, and we, from the neighborhood too. I stay friends with them even though they're from the other side of the tracks, but that's okay. A real good friend of mine came from just off of Lincoln and Woodward in that area over there. So we maintain the friendships and so on. And I just love to see the neighborhood. For a long time, I never even had to drive a car to get to my places. My dentist was across the street from me. I had a Cole's food
Not
store.
Coupling. You didn't go to Coupling.
Pinter.
Pinter.
Right.
Because Coupling was right up the street. He was my meanest man.
Oh, I had a good one. It's
Horrible.
Pinter.
Hideous. Right up the street.
My drugstore was across the alley from me. Then the church, IC Church, was on the corner. I had the Cole's food store that I could walk to. I had stores up and down KK that if I needed them, were there. I had the library. You name it, I have it. Like I said, I didn't even have to get in the car to go far.
That's what I always tell my husband. I got the library. I got the liquor store.
One more do I need. I had Siegel's liquor store, And now, I'll be honest, now I have, which I think is one of the best things that's happened to me, and that's being part of the Bayview Historic Society and so on. Like I said, we do have connection. My aunt was a charter member, but I never thought an awful lot about it up until a few years ago, and kind of started coming here, and one of my cousins was donating things. And Britton House. Yeah, I remember the Quincy's and me measuring the cabinets because she didn't want to see a ruler, so I measured them with my hand, and that sort of thing. And then I got to know Nancy Tawney, who was running the open houses here, and we started talking, and then I found out that somebody that was doing the tours was leaving. So I gave her my name and number. I said, well, if you need somebody, I'm only a few blocks away. I know the house pretty well. So that's how I got to be with the Bayview Neighborhood
Well, obviously you
Association.
would know. Is that fireplace usable?
Yeah,
And
right. It could still be, sure. And
Probably
that's
should be cleaned or
that's
something.
original, and that's original.
That'd be
mantle.
so fun to have a fire.
And so on. And then I've been with the Bayview Historic Society for about 6 years now, and so on. So that's it, and I plan on continuing doing what I'm doing here. I enjoy it. I've seen the changes, and I can be honest, I'm a little, I don't want to say leery. My situation is because I'm so close to a site that could impact me. There was talk. It's kind of dead right now, but it can always come back. And that is, next to me at the bank building, they wanted to put up a 200-unit development. It was huge. It was just beyond. It would be two buildings, one on the bank and then where the old drugstore is on Herman. But it was 200 units and then commercial on the first floors.
What happened to the space where they took down the Washington Post? It's just sitting there, empty field now.
That will be a place.
It's still
Right.
in process?
Oh yeah. It's the guy that's fixing up the building across the street.
Yeah.
That whatever that was in there. I don't even know what was in there. He's gonna do that, and I believe it'll be 30 to 40 units, which is okay. He's gonna keep it small, and he's also the same guy. He's doing the building across the street from the library, and then the
Alchemist?
Right, the Alchemist, and then the lot there. He's going to put in 30 to 40 units over there too.
But that huge building that they're putting up on
Base.
Bay, how many units is that? How are they going to fill that?
It's 144, I understand.
It's humongous. I mean, it's
huge.
a behemoth.
I didn't think it was going to turn out that way. I'm somewhat disappointed. I'll Okay, you'd have to kind of be from here and know what's going on. 144 up there. Then there's the Faust Music Building, as we call it, where Faust Music was. They took that building down and they built at least 5 stories. I don't know exactly how many units, 30 to 40 in there, first floor commercial. It was coming down KK and so on. Then the developer wanted to buy the bank out and put in 200 units.
Wow.
And we had to go to Tony Zielinski, in neighborhood meetings and stop it. His thinking was, we'll give them 144 up there, and then we'll keep everything at the low end down here. Then this developer came in and wanted the bank site, to put in 200, so we had to stop that. But I'll be honest, I thought the 144, I didn't think it was going to look like that.
Well, the parking, I think,
man.
adds to the size of
It's
yeah.
And if that's on 40, 60 more, 200 next
Where
to
do
me.
they want to build 200?
The bank building, that whole site. Because he was going to take 3 houses down on Herman Street too. Right.
Okay.
Right. So it
Flushing.
would wrap around. It would wrap around
Oh,
the
is it
corner.
time already?
Well, let's go ahead and thanks for your time, Ed. And
If-
all
It
your
was
information.
so interesting.
Any questions as long as I'm here?
I don't think so.
I think
But
we've
we might get
covered.
back to you if we have more questions. But otherwise, thanks again for
we
your
know where you're
contribution. And
And
Well-
this is our stuff, right? You're giving this to us?
Yeah.
okay.
Did you
Okay.
scan these?
They're scanned in upstairs.
No.
Oh, they're scanned in already?
We'll go ahead
Okay.
and sign off then. Thanks
Good.
again.
Okay,